has to be Christy Clark. Wait. Hear me out. I know. Okay, so Trudeau's out. Great. All the Hogs get their wish. Their snouts are deep in the trough. Whatever. Good for them. I'm certainly no Trudeau booster. I can easily name a lot of things he's done I strongly disagree with. But I could also name some number of things I would point to as things I'm pretty happy about. While many political epitaphs will be put out there in the coming days, weeks, months, I would quickly sum up my overall assessment of Trudeau fundamentally as, he's fine. He's fine. I mean, when viewed through the lens of realpolitik, when you consider that he unseated Harper and all of the other real possible alternative political realities in this country, not just the conservatives he buried, with the possible exception of Aaron O'Toole, who was too decent a man to be supported enough by the Hogs base of the Conservative Party to win, as well as the political rivals within his own party who might have lost to lunatic cretins like Scheer if they'd been in power. Going forward, I will insist and defend on an entirely neutral assessment of Trudeau. I've said for a long time that legalizing weed was exactly as good as the broken promise of electoral reform was bad, and have remained fundamentally neutral on his overall legacy, if not any given day-to-day governance. A lot of good, a lot of bad, all of which can and will be litigated by others in the media. But now, what matters now, is what happens next. The Liberals will have a leadership race. There will be a lot of digital ink spilled asking who can defeat Poilievre. Well, we need to stow that shit right now. The answer is that nobody can. However, when Trudeau was belligerently staying on, I was saying that the only possible good thing that could be done to mitigate the harm would be for Singh to step down, and a fearless, gives-no-fucks progressive bulldog like Nathan Cullen or somebody like that, who could match Poilievre's energy in the right way, was needed if we were to have any hope of holding him to a minority, let alone preventing him from taking power at all. Poilievre sucks, of course, and is terrible, but this isn't a Why Poilievre Sucks video. Here we will take that as given, well-established, and obvious on its face if you're watching this video. But now the calculus has changed. Now the conversation will shift to what Liberal leadership contender could defeat Poilievre. As I said, none can, though. Give up on that dream right now. For many reasons, we are locked in for a Poilievre majority government. There is a fascist, nationalist mood sweeping the Western world, and in our country, unfortunately, the avatar for all of those hateful, regressive impulses is Poilievre. We have a public who institutionally forgets how horrible modern conservative rule is, especially with a Harper but so much worse Poilievre type. We also have a dipshit young male contingency who's all in on the misogyny, racism, and their whole when is the straight cis white male going to get his day in this country mentality, and general willful ignorance which Poilievre has tapped into. We have a career politician who has somehow managed to bamboozle the conservative base into thinking he's some kind of populist for the everyman. We have an economy in the tank for reasons really quite out of the hands of Canada itself or the policies of any given leader, and a Poilievre who stands for all of the things which will make everything worse for the economy, animating all the Hogs who think destroying economic safeguards in this country will somehow improve things for them. They who benefit from such safeguards and protections along with the rest of us. We have American politics invading our own domestic politics in a particularly insipid way, made all the worse by the unspeakable horror of a second Trump administration. God, it calls me so badly that Poilievre supporters think he'll do anything other than supplicate himself and our country to that fucking... But then I remember that all of his supporters are his supporters. They're just ignorant and not that bright. They're all just scared betas who just want to offer up their banana to the alpha they think will protect them. And that because of this, they want Poilievre to supplicate himself to Trump. Hell, these are probably all the same people who actually want Canada to become the 51st state for fuck's sakes. So, much like Dr. Strange foresaw that the only way they could win in the end was to lose the right way in the short term, we as progressives and liberals must concede the same and have the same mentality. Because of all the factors I've outlined, we are doomed to a conservative Poilievre government, and barring for all intents and purposes a literal political act of God, most likely a Poilievre majority. God help us all. But now Trudeau has resigned, which means there is room to maneuver how that loss will play out and how the pieces will be left on the board in the wake of that loss. Now we get a Liberal leadership race. Now I have to reiterate, do not get it twisted. Whoever wins will lose, which only leaves us with two questions. One, exactly how bad will the loss be? And two, will the new Liberal leader be someone who sticks around to take Poilievre down or flames out so badly that they have to go away and there's a new leadership race? And that's the real thing here. That has to be the real endgame we keep our focus on. Who could become the leader of the Liberals today? Who could limit Poilievre to as few terms as possible? Who has the fight and capacity to spend those entire 4 years highlighting what sneering, petty little bitch that piece of shit bully is and what a man of the people he is most decidedly not? Who can accelerate public fatigue with his sneering, petty little bitch routine, and whose very nature is practically political kryptonite to him? Who doesn't have obvious anti-populist weak spots he can use to deflect and distract from how ruinous his policies will be for actual people while he serves only capital and reactionary impulses for as long as he's in office? So let's consider the people who have been named as the frontrunners on day one, and look at them through the lens of a mouth-breathing, hot dog neck, diesel-guzzling, truck-driving while bitching about a carbon tax they actually net benefit from fuck Trudeau flag-waving hog supporter of Poilievre, shall we? We have to present them with someone either A, more appealing to them, B, someone who could shine a light on how pathetic and ruinous Poilievre is without him just reflecting it back at them, or C, someone who will just make them too apathetic to vote for anyone at all. So, Chrystia Freeland, really? Do we really have to have this conversation? I mean, I certainly don't. Nazi relatives aside, she's been groomed for years to be the prime minister in waiting and chosen successor by Trudeau himself. And then right at the finish line, she burned him. Trudeau, based on the speech I heard today, will not support her as leader. Whether there is genuine animus between them or it's a gambit to distance her from him to make her more electable, a strategy I seriously doubt Trudeau's ego would allow, she's a non-starter. She doesn't have the support of Trudeau's machine, but is covered head to toe in his stink. I'm not saying necessarily that she can't or won't win the leadership contest, only that she'll never be prime minister now, and we'll have to suffer through Poilievre being prime minister for as long as it takes for her to flame out and a new leader to be elected. She'll never get back to the same level of power to be positioned to run again, and if she wins this time, she'll preside over a generational landslide Liberal defeat, likely relegated again to third-party status and join Kim Campbell and Canada's Glass Cliff alumnus, then preside over another, longer, more contentious leadership race while Poilievre wrecks house. Freeland's only shot at actually becoming prime minister is the Poilievre model, to wait and let a couple sacrificial lambs become leader and take their failed shots while waiting for everyone to forget how much they hate you while just snottily eating an apple and being shitty to everyone. Let's face it, she just doesn't have that juice. No way. Even if she did, sexism still being what it is today, a woman trying to play that same routine coming off the way she does and would, she just could never get away with that. She comes off and would all the more so fundamentally as smug, which is exactly the rotten essential core of the Trudeau Liberals which has to be excised. It's a smugness and entitledness which only comes from a decade of governance and an impression of oneself as having the right to rule. That will be the downfall of anyone with Trudeau's stink on them, and she's absolutely soaking in it, more so than anybody else who could possibly run. I guarantee that Freeland winning the Liberal leadership either A, won't happen, or B, if it does, will lead to the greatest reduction of seats in the next generational election compared to any that would happen under any other candidate. Mark Carney? Really? Do we have to do this again? Wonky egghead with no actual political chops or experience? Visiting professor, anyone? Do we really not remember Ignatieff and that whole disaster? Come on, people! The elites will rally behind him, if not Freeland. They will cite his economic bona fides and all the actual real people who don't follow politics outside of elections, and even then, only with a passing interest, will have no idea who he is and will not be impressed by what they see. You simply cannot just parachute someone in with no political experience into a leadership race and expect them to win. And besides all that, to the real deciders of this election, to the Hogs supporting Poilievre, he is Captain Current Economic Order so plainly that he is an obvious and easy target for Poilievre. If Poilievre and Carney are ever on a debate stage together, whether in a formal debate or on the floor of Parliament, let's just say I don't envy whoever has to clean up the political blood afterwards. Harper was a terrible retail politician, a genuinely skin-crawling, inducing, reptilian kind of off-putting. He didn't even have the kind of hog charisma Poilievre does. But even he was able to easily dismantle Ignatieff as an out-of-touch elite, and Poilievre versus Carney would be such an epic political bloodbath so far beyond imagination that it boggles my mind the elites are even floating the idea. Mélanie Joly? Maybe. Maybe. She does have some juice, but how much I don't know. Joly would be a great candidate against a serious conservative type. Give me Joly versus O'Toole. Thing is, I've never seen her get dirty. She's soft-spoken, thoughtful, but she does come off as having a backbone and an untested reservoir of strength and resolve. I haven't seen how she reacts when things get gross, though. The kind of gross Poilievre brings everything down to. A non-political junkie's passing impression of her? Serious person, but not an ivory tower type. Thoughtful, yes, but that can be problematic. I imagine her being the type who is still trying to figure out how to counter the first wad of feces Poilievre has thrown at her while getting covered in dozens of subsequent wads. That's my impression. Against a serious person, she could be a very serious contender. But she wouldn't be running against a serious person. She'll be running against fucking Poilievre. An inflammatory, sneering bullshit. Well, I don't even want to call him a bullshit artist because there's no artistry to his routine. And I don't read from Joly as someone who has in them what would really be required to stand up to something like that, let alone effectively counter it. I just see all the lies and bullshit Poilievre would continuously fling at her, sticking to her and accumulating, and that she'd have no way to shake it off and hit back. I also haven't seen from her any capacity to punch back in the way someone would need to against a Poilievre. He's a coward and a bully, and like all bullies, his fundamental kryptonite is just being laughed at, being belittled and dismantled as the small, pathetic little man he is. Like Trump, this is difficult to have the stomach to do when he's such a genuinely dangerous threat to the fabric and order of the country. But the only bright and hopeful moment in the otherwise pathetically hapless Kamala Harris campaign was the brief window when they embraced Walz and his "why are you so fucking weird" attitude. Fascist little freaks like Poilievre and Trump absolutely wither on the delight of that kind of ridicule because it exposes what scared, pathetic, impotent little freaks they really are. More importantly, it exposes how very not normal they are and triggers them into acting even weirder. But more on that later. And then we have, wait, this can't be right. Francois, Jesus fucking Christ, you're already making me pull up a separate keyboard to type his name, Philippe. Oh my God, literally Champagne? Seriously, are you fucking kidding me, Champagne? Really? Really? Again? Do we really have to do this again? Stéphane Dion, anyone? Exactly. Too fucking French. I mean, I hate it, but that's what it comes down to for the Hogs. I mean, Mélanie Joly, you can at least be ignorant enough to not realize it's a French name. But Francois-Philippe Champagne? No. Comes off so European, a Hog would probably just write him off as baggy fancy pants, if you'll excuse the expression to accentuate the attitude Poilievre's Hogs would have towards him. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Dion himself was actually great. A real green environmentalist guy back when that sort of thing would have made a difference. But today is the miserable reality we find ourselves in. Smart people who would generally probably manage our country fairly well, your Dions, your Ignatius, hell, probably even your Carneys, and your, wait, no, this still can't be right, Champagne? But competence and vision are not what win elections. Electoral politics, I'm afraid, are ultimately all high school bullshit. And that's the problem. It really is all high school bullshit. The rubes, the Hogs, the general public, people are generally quite dumb. And I don't generally necessarily begrudge them this all that much, unless, of course, they take that and energize a rabid faction of toxic political movement which spells ruination for my country and the people I care about. To be honest, I sometimes envy people of average and lesser intelligence. You know, your Clyde do-something types. And what a simpler, more comprehensible world they must live in. Politics is esoteric and boring and usually feels very far away from an average person's life. As George Carlin once said, think about how stupid the average person is. Then remember that half of people are dumber than that. Some winners, a whole lot of losers. But I get it. Life's tough. Things are hard to figure out. And most people fundamentally don't ever politically evolve beyond the politics they understood in high school. They don't look at issues or policy. They see and think in terms of archetypes and vibes. They look for the easiest way to pigeonhole political figures into archetypes they understand. The jock, the bully, the egghead, the teacher's pet, the rich kid who you always felt looking down on you even though they pretended to be nice. The young Republican type, the insufferable debate lord, your friend's fun mom, your friend's hot mom with the large breasts you couldn't stop looking at and be nullified because you're a 14-year-old boy. Anyway, which all brings us down to this. The Canadian federal politics of 2025 Doctor Strange, there's only one way we can win aspect of all this. Christy fucking Clark. I've been referring to her as future prime minister since she was premier of BC, but don't get it twisted, I fucking hate her. Her policy was dog shit. She was scandal prone. I hated that she was a traitor against her own kind, a teachers union busting daughter of a teacher and teacher herself who made a political name for herself ordering the BC Teachers Union back to work at the behest of Gordon Campbell, working to destroy public schools while putting her own kids in Catholic schools. Now, for those who don't know, the BC Liberal Party, which she was a part of and later the leader of, was the de facto Conservative Party in BC at the time. Elections in those days were always fundamentally between the centre-left NDP and the centre-right BC Liberals, who also always had the far-right Conservative ankle-biters at their feet as much as the NDP had to fight off the Greens to their left. The BC Liberals referred to themselves as the Free Enterprise Coalition Party, and were for BC politics of the day, and arguably still today in their new incarnation as BC United, terrible name, despite ever-creeping conservatism in politics in general, as conservative as a competitive political party in BC could be. Clark came up around the time I was having my political conversion to leftist politics, and for much of her political career, during which she was dogged by scandals she couldn't shake, some legitimately hers, others just baggage she had to carry for Gordon Campbell, she was my clear political enemy. I remember being very openly happy about being able to vote against her personally and specifically in the West Side Kelowna riding at the time. But here's the thing. Despite all of that, I kind of like Christy Clark. As much as I might vehemently disagree with any number of her political positions and actions she took when she had political power, damn it, she's got the juice. She's got the chops, whatever you want to call it. She's got it. She makes you want to like her in a way only really great retail politicians can. She knows how to talk to people. She's unusually practiced at it. After being the union-busting education minister and before running for leadership of the party, she spent some years doing a daily midday call-in talk radio show on CKNW, the premier news and politics talk radio channel in the greater Vancouver area and rebroadcast around the province. You can't do that kind of thing if you don't know how to communicate, how to listen, and how to talk to people. And if you're already good at that, doing that kind of thing is only going to make you sharper and better at it. My point is certainly not that Christy Clark deserves to be liked, but that she is the kind of politician who has the capacity to make you want to like them, even if you know you should hate them and everything they stand for. Most importantly here, though, is that this is exactly the kind of armor someone needs to effectively counter a sneering, shit-flinging predator like Pierre fucking Poilievre. With Clark, it's the opposite of what I was describing with Joly. I see Joly's political armor as being like felt, textured, soothingly soft, yet remarkably rugged if you get up close to it. But fling any shit on it, and oh damn, that stuff's on there for good. Christy Clark could bring that good, why are you so fucking weird energy Walls had. She's getting on now to be saying this kind of thing about a 60-year-old woman, but she's also hot. And I'm sorry, but like it or not, this is still something that matters for modern female politicians. It shouldn't, but it does. I mean, it still matters to men too, but they tend to get more latitude for that sort of thing. Being handsome can help a male politician more than being unattractive can hurt. But it's the inverse for female politicians. There were many scandals about it in the legislature when she was premier, like when a bitter, grumpy old man member of the opposition criticized her for dressing like a hussy when she came to the legislature with like half an inch of cleavage past the top of her shirt because she's got biggins and she wasn't wearing a fucking turtleneck. There was another mini scandal when she was asked on a radio show as sitting premier, what's it like being a MILF? She's also openly discussed an incident of sexual assault when she was young. She's comfortable weaponizing her femininity both as a sword and a shield. She doesn't give a fuck, but she can laugh it off like with the cleavage incident or play it like a, look what I have to deal with the MILF comments while also laughing at it. She's just got that juice. Whatever it is that makes someone come off as a real person, as a person you want to like even if you know you shouldn't, she's got it. She's the kind of person who, unlike any other possible candidate, when Poilievre throws shit at her, it will make people say, what? Her? But she's like, she's like cool. And I'm sorry, but the same people who would be impressed with her bust and her MILF energy such as it is are exactly the same kind of grunting hogs who are currently very excited to elect a sneering, soulless attack dog like Poilievre. The exact same hogs. Let's go through some of the other strengths she has as a potential leader of the Liberal Party after reviewing our list so far. Okay, 1, she's got the juice. But what does that really mean? It means she's got the kind of charisma that makes you want to like her even if you objectively have every reason to dislike her and everything she stands for. The more she talks, the more persuasive she is. Unlike Poilievre, who is the opposite, someone disliked more and more the more you hear him speaking. Likewise, the other potential leaders come off as ever more distant and out of touch as they speak. 2, she's attractive and has MILF energy. I'm not saying this should matter, but it does. It makes conservative hogs likely to like her for reasons they don't understand since they're all scared little insecure boys at their core who want mommy or daddy to be in charge and controlling things. They tried to make Mamala a thing, but as soon as you hear Kamala Harris talk, you hear what a fucking weirdo she is. Clark was a radio show host. She knows how to work a crowd and she knows how to massage a message. She's got that charm that just makes sneering, feces flinging from trolls like Poilievre just not stick. Now let's add to that list of number 3. She has 0 Trudeau stink on her. Absolutely none. Not even a whiff. In fact, she has the credit of having been critical of him already, of already having joined the Conservative Party to vote for a more electable leader in the past, which gives her anti-Poilievre credibility as well. Some talking heads will say that this will make it difficult for her to get elected leader of the Liberal Party, but they're in another universe. She will be the only one in the race who will be able to freely criticize anything, anyone, and everything associated with Trudeau, while all of the others will have to try to save face having been part of his government. Look, I'm a radical progressive. Do I actually want a Liberal Party win at all in the abstract? No. But the thing is, for the foreseeable future, the ship has sailed on progressive politics. We are in a regressive, fascist, right-wing populist mood, both globally and domestically, and that's the ground on which this election will need to be fought. This is ultimately about harm reduction at this point, which now just boils down to limiting the length and scope of an inevitable Poilievre government. Compounding that, of course, is Liberal fatigue. We are in a change election environment, and the mood is decidedly against the only party that can stop Poilievre. To that end, we need someone with no stink on them at all to the point that they have been notably hostile to the current regime, such as Christy Clark has been. And what's more, she's run this playbook before. After having been the anti-union education minister while having her own son in private Catholic school, She smelled blood in the water and resigned while Campbell ran out his term, did talk radio for a few years, and then came back to take the party over from a beleaguered and disgraced exiting party leader who'd led for several terms. Does this sound familiar? Gordon Campbell was totally cooked, and everyone rightly wrote off the party. Michael Smith, a well-known political weenie roast of a man, ran the banner headline, "If this man kicked a dog, he would still win the election," against her in reference to her opponent, and she won. She gives off affable mom energy, but don't get it twisted. This woman is a shark, a glassy-eyed political predator who knows how to play the game as brutally and as viciously cutthroat as anyone, while not coming off as she's like that. That's what makes her so effective, and that's why we need to deploy her to take down Poilievre. Fourth thing, she can effectively court right-wing based constituencies. She's charismatic and likable, and she'll say all the right things to them. She's also shameless enough to say conflicting things in different rooms to different groups if she thinks it will help her. Though admittedly this has a tendency to get her in trouble, but right-wing audiences usually aren't savvy or aware enough to call anyone out on such things if they like them. Their whole worldview is, after all, typically rooted in cognitive dissonance. For the religious right, she can, if nothing else, point to having had her own son in Catholic school. She also has strong regressive credibility as a union-busting education minister, having run as the leader of the Conservative Option Party in BC, which was almost ironically named the BC Liberals, makes her an adept political chameleon, and will be able to convince any number of hogs that she's with them and on their side regardless of the degree to which she does or doesn't support them and their issues. For a fifth thing, she has a record of reliably delivering for all the people I certainly hate and are behind the ruination of everything good and sacred in the world, but who are, let's not be mistaken, the root and core of the Liberal Party. Business interests. The people who run the world will let a little Poilievre off the leash to discipline the peasants and keep us in line when they need to. The cretins who would burn the entire system to ashes before letting an actual progressive ever attain power here or anywhere, they know that she's a reliable soldier for them. She has a proven track record she can point to of delivering for them. The owner class values one thing above all other things: stable continuity of the status quo, which maintains the vast wealth-sucking machine from the bottom to the top. They support the centrist neoliberal parties as that vehicle until it seems untenable, then turn to a Trump or Poilievre when they have to, who will at least still be loyal dogs to capital. But it's a bumpier and less stable road with their constant appeals to fascism, racial nativism, and regressive politics in general. Give them a good option to support who will be just as loyal, but who comes with the added benefit of social stability and is a sound bet, and they'll line up behind them. Not having institutionalized, legalized political bribery in Canada the way they have in the United States with the Citizens United decision, the equation is a little different here, but what it will mean in this context is that the moneyed interests who run the smoke-filled rooms behind the public-facing facade of the Liberal Party, the kingmakers such as they are, can be made to see that Clark is their soundest investment they have if we try. Currently, they want Carney because they win and we lose. No matter who wins, it's just a question of degree. So they need to be made to see that before we go through a ruinous Ignatieff 2.0 and or Dion 2.0. Basically, my argument comes down to this. Normal Canadian political cadence is this. A longtime leader finally goes down. The base gets their "fuck you, we're going to express all of our mewing grievances by electing a leader who will represent all the impulses which had to be suppressed for years for the party to remain in power and palatable to the mainstream." See Preston Manning, see Stéphane Dion, see Andrew Scheer. Then the party apparatchiks get their choice, someone who they condescendingly consider a grown-up, but who has no appeal to the base, and who hate them because they're still restless after having been suppressed for so long. See Stockwell Day, see Michael Ignatieff, see Aaron O'Toole. And then finally, when both sides have had their day and still lost, the popular base of the party and its leadership finally have to reconcile in order to ever be able to win again. They hammer out their differences, they have a more sincere and open leadership contention, and they get their champion who both sides can live with if not love. See Harper, see Trudeau, and God help us, see Poilievre. The problem is, it generally takes about 8 to 12 years for this cycle to play itself out. And 8 to 12 years of a Poilievre government, without hyperbole, is an endgame situation for Canada. He is Captain Business Interests. He is Captain The Swamp. He is Captain Regressive. He is Captain Rabid White Nationalist Nativism. He is the champion of everything that is bad and could be made worse in this country, and a rabid attack dog against anything good left about this country which could ever be improved. He is, quite simply, the worst. We don't have time for that whole political cycle to play itself out. What I'm saying is that we all need to go into the Doctor Strange possible world seeing trance, evaluate all of the possibilities and possible outcomes, and recognize with all due horror that a Christy Clark Liberal leadership is the only way we can win in the end. It is the only way we can short-circuit this cycle and get a different outcome. The way we lose the least if we can't win. Can she prevent Poilievre from becoming Prime Minister? No, of course not. Nobody can. And anyone who thinks that is possible or tells you it is is either delusional or knowingly lying to you for their own ends. I remember all too well all of the NDP talking heads lining up behind Mulcair and swearing up and down that polling was a dead mystical art that should be ignored, right up until Trudeau ate the entirety of their lunch and stole their lunch money for the next week. I was mortified at how brazenly they could just lie without obvious reality. Don't let them do it again. Don't let the Liberals do the same thing. We have to short-circuit the playbook. Christy Clark is the perfect, natural anti-venom to Poilievre's sneering mean-spiritedness. But critically, she's also not soft and squishy either. She's sharp. She can spar, make you want to believe her. And what's more, she really wants it. She is so hungry for it, and she knows that this is her shot and she's going to take it. She's been in the lab cooking for this run without anybody paying attention to her for years, and she's about to light her rockets. She knows now is the time, and she's going to take her shot, and we should support her even if it's stomach-turning, because we're in checkmate here, and every other possible outcome is worse. She's been stealth campaigning for this for years. She put out a Christmas card in French, for Christ's sakes. And I'm super curious to see how her French is and how long she's been learning it. Anyways, for all these reasons, we, and we meaning anybody to the left of Satan, from far-left radicals like me to center-right business interest people, we have to get behind her. She wants it, and she's hungry for it, and she can win. Every other leadership contender will either feel too entitled and or above all that to taste the blood in their mouth, to really get that eye of the tiger and get dirty fighting political bloodlust that's required to take down a Poilievre type now or in the coming years. It's like we see in movies when one predator recognizes another predator when they look in each other's eyes. When they say you need a monster to fight a monster. The King Kong we need to recruit to fight Godzilla. Christy Clark knows exactly what Poilievre is made of and knows that behind his sneering facade he's a weak little boy, and she knows exactly how to deal with pathetic little cretins like him. She's been dealing with them for her entire political career. She could easily dismantle Poilievre. They've got absolutely nothing to hit her with. Poilievre's only move is attack. He's got nothing else, and she presents no targets to him. But she's the only one none of it will stick to. That it can't really land on, and what's more, all that shit is just as likely to sling back at them for being such obviously absurd attacks. And just like Trump, a woman, the right woman, mind you, would be kryptonite to Poilievre because it would automatically neutralize so many lines of attack. It worked at first with Harris versus Trump. I mean, she was such an utterly dogshit candidate in every other respect, but he was so frustrated being criticized by a woman of all things that it infuriated him. It made him get angry, made him make mistakes. A woman like Freeland or Jolie isn't a problem for Poilievre because he'll just spend the entire campaign just saying they're a new face on the same Trudeau government and reiterate all of the same lies and dog whistles. But Clark? Oh, but that won't work with Clark, will it? With Clark, he'll actually have to engage, actually have to say substantial things about her specifically. And I'm telling you, he will fuck it up. Eventually, anyways. By that point, he'll be prime minister, of course, and we have to remember that that game is already lost. That ship has already sailed. We already have to be in a harm reduction mode mentality, and what I need you to understand and believe is that Christy Clark is the best chance we have at taking Poilievre down after his first term. That is the best case scenario left to us of only a menu of bad options. That he is either kept to a minority in his first term once he has to actually wear all of the realities he's currently lying about being Trudeau's fault, or out of office entirely after 4 years of a majority. Poilievre currently has 100 health. And he will continue to have full health until the day he becomes prime minister. The day after, his political health starts draining, though. As a vampiric political force, if he has a Freeland, Carney, Jolie, or an even... No, okay, his name is literally Champagne. He will be able to sustain his political energy by feeding on them, continuing to attack them as the reason why things are still bad and continuing to get worse. See for reference the way everything bad is Obama and Biden's fault and everything good is because of Trump, while reality is exactly the opposite. But he won't be able to feed off of a Christy Clark in the same way to sustain his political energies. Instead, he would be continuously sapped of his political energy with nobody around to blame and feed off of to the point that he could be taken down early from a minority position, or taken off the board entirely after 4 ruinous years of him leading a majority government. And okay, fine. A final note of reckless hope. She is obviously not a progressive. She'll struggle to court any support from people who would otherwise support the NDP the way Trudeau did. Progressives will have no illusions about her, and anybody to the left of actual center will clamor vocally for a legitimate progressive candidate both in the NDP and in a future Liberal Party leadership. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves. And sure, you never know. As much as we can't go into this nightmare with an optimistic mindset, we really don't know how much current high conservative support is really anti-liberal sentiment versus anti-Trudeau sentiment versus anti-Team Trudeau sentiment. The right candidate, who really doesn't have any Trudeau stink on them, to the degree that even dumb Hogs can't be duped into thinking she's just another Trudeau, and who is an effective foil against Poilievre, well, weirder things have happened in Canadian politics, but only when we've let them.